Hey everyone, it's Rob Folia and Jessica Klein with Folia Properties at Keller Williams here in Nashville, and we're coming to you today to discuss what is a home inspection. Basically, as a buyer, as a seller, like what to expect throughout the process, and um, and yeah, we're gonna actually go through an old home inspection that I had done at a townhome I used to own, and so that way you get to see some pictures from it and kind of know what to expect. And so, Jessica, you ready to jump in and get started?
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited about this.
Awesome. And honestly, and I'm just going to scroll down. And as I'm scrolling, I just want y'all to realize before we even look, this is just a little townhome, a little 1,200 square foot townhome in Murfreesboro. Newer, I think it was built in like '05 or '06, and yet it's still 30 something pages, the report. So it's normal for a home inspection to be about 30 pages, something to expect as a buyer and as a seller. And I'm going to scroll down to where we're getting pictures as we're talking. I just wanted to bring up though, as we're looking at this, basically the right mindset to have as both a buyer and as a seller is to almost do your best to be objective throughout the process. I think the home inspection can be a very maybe scary is the right term, can be a very
Yeah,
frightening experience for especially a buyer, for a seller as well though. And the most important thing to remember as a buyer is that it's here for your protection. It's here to make sure that the things that we can't see when we're looking at the home, that basically that there's not something hidden in the attic or hidden in the crawl space or in the behind the electrical panel, and that you're covered, you're protected. Does that make sense, Jessica?
yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, most of us are not home experts. We're not contractors. We're not people who know everything about every part of how a home is built and how it should be to be safe. And so this is just a really good way to get someone who has good overall knowledge to come in and say, hey, these things probably are not such a big deal, but these things really should be looked at. And yes, separating the two and knowing what's important and what's not, because no house, even new construction, is going to be perfect.
Well, absolutely, and like we always recommend Nashville Home Inspection. This was again an old inspection that they had done, and they're going to break up their report into things that are more maintenance items. Like when you see the M, that's what that is, and there may be some repair items on here as well. And every home's going to have something. And as a buyer, it's important to remember that we're looking for big ticket items, for safety items, for things that if they're left alone are going to progressively get worse. I mean, because that's the reality is like those things, even if it's a small leak, it could turn into something larger. Or, if it's a big ticket item or a safety concern, we definitely want to get that addressed. And it's like here was
For sure.
a repair item needed because there's an R. And I also just want to make sure that we point out is for buyers that are out there, this is not like a punch list. So,
Right.
this is something that we just hand over to a seller and say, hey, fix everything on here. That's not appropriate. It's not a cosmetic inspection because we can see if there are nicks on the wall. Like I don't think I ever had this fixed because to me that's cosmetic. Yeah, it's a repair, it's weather stripping, but it's cosmetic.
Mhm.
I didn't ask for them to have that fixed. And so point being that the more cosmetic items that are on here, that's not what the home inspection's for. The home inspection's for the things that again are safety concerns, things like something like this that you can see noted wet trim in the bottom corners of the rear entry sliding glass doors, basically to repair it or to start to remediate that process. Things along those lines that if that's left alone, it's going to progressively get worse. So to start to caulk it and to seal it properly. Um, as a seller, I think it's important to keep those same things in mind just from the other side of the table, so to speak. Meaning, as a seller, it's not good for us to dig our heels into the sand, so to speak, and say, "Well, we're not going to fix anything because this home is just, we're not going to do anything." It's basically a good practice to look at it and say, "Well, if I were in their shoes, is this something that would concern me? Is it if,
Right.
that, if I were in the buyer's shoes, is this something that I would also want addressed?" So again, like a leak, like an HVAC unit that may be needing to be repaired, or yeah, like big ticket items, safety concerns, things like that. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, it does. And it can seem a little strange from the seller's perspective, to look at it from the buyer perspective. And I think the reason that that's really important is because if this buyer is feeling unsure, or there's a deal breaker in the home inspection report for them, you may be okay with losing that buyer, but it's very likely that the next buyer and the next buyer and the next buyer will have the same reaction. And
Well, especially
so,
if it's something
yeah,
large, especially.
exactly. Yeah. Like if there's a structural issue, um, you know, it might not be your favorite thing to pay a few $100s, couple $1,000 to make the deal happen or to get the house in good shape. But it's likely that that's going to come up in a future sale if this one does fall through.
Well, exactly. And it's important to keep in mind, too, that in Tennessee, at least, the way the inspection process works is that buyers, they ultimately have a lot more leverage than sellers, meaning buyers, they can ask for a lot of different items and have the right to walk away in a very subjective manner. And I'm not saying that to give buyers the ability to just say, hey, I don't like that there's a paint chip here, so I'm going to walk away, because that's not
Right.
what it's for. But it's there because ultimately what's large to you, Jessica, may be small to me, and what's small to you may be large to me. Like to you, what was a small item to my, probably to just about everybody, that a ceiling fan isn't functioning properly on the high setting. And yet, if there were a lot of items that start adding up to a buyer, they do have the right to walk away from the contract at that point after the home inspection's done. And so that's what I mean in terms of they have a little bit more leverage in the in just in the whole ordeal. And it's just important that both sides keep a level-headed mindset, and just remember to be objective. Look at it as in, if I were on that other side, would I be asking for this as well? If
Right.
I weren't involved in the sale at all, like that's honestly that's a way that I like to look at this. If I weren't involved in the sale at all, do I think that's a fair thing to ask for? And if that's the case, then let's move forward on it. Let's ask for it if we're on the buy side. If we're on the sell side, if we think it's fair, let's concede that item. Let's take care of it.
Absolutely.
So I think that's. I mean, I can keep scrolling. You can see we're getting toward the end of the report, and the less exciting items will start popping up, like how old an HVAC is and things like that. I think that's all though that we had for you today on a home inspection. Jessica, was there anything that we missed that we wanted to cover today?
The only other thing I would say is to be very careful and to be willing to spend a little bit more in order to get a really good home inspector like
Yes.
Nashville Home Inspection, because it really does, it makes a huge difference to have someone who's thorough, who takes all the pictures, who has the knowledge to back up all of this information. It's absolutely worth it to make that investment on the front end
Well, exactly, and
for
I'm glad you
both
brought that
parties.
up. I'm glad you brought that up too, because ultimately, you're right. It's almost like the old saying: "There's always somebody that'll do it cheaper." I remember when I first got started in real estate, that it was before I really knew what I was doing, and I'm very thankful to those first couple clients I had for helping me, for letting me stumble through some things. And before I had great connections like John and Joan over at Nashville Home Inspection, and anyway, the reason I bring this up is I remember, and I'll just leave it on with this picture right here. But the reason I bring that up is I remember that I had a client that had just a little fly-by-night home inspector, the cheapest home inspector you've probably ever seen, because a typical home inspection report, $400 or $500 somewhere in there. I mean, it depends on the size of the home. There's a lot of factors that go into it. And yet, this home inspection was somewhere like $250 or something, and it was junk. I mean, the guy, I don't think there were any pictures involved, and he scared the daylights out of the buyer. And I mean, that's going to happen when somebody isn't a professional. And
Right.
because a home inspector's job, while their job is to inform you, and that ultimately may startle you as a buyer, the reality is a good home inspector is going to not only give you the information, but they're also going to let you know, hey, this is something I see in just about every home, or this is something that, this is something that, this is a way to remedy that, little things like that that can go a long way. So,
Absolutely. Yep, I agree.
well, cool. Well, if y'all have any questions about this, reach out to us directly. You can reach us 615-591-5665. And as we're going through the process on the buy side, we can connect you with a great company like a Nashville Home Inspection. There are other great companies out there as well. So any home inspector friends of mine that we didn't point out, no disrespect at all intended. And when we're on the sell side, just again remember, stay objective. Think about it as in, hey, if we were on the buy side, would we want that taken care of? So I guess until next time, we can let y'all go.
Yeah, sounds good. See you next time.
All right, see y'all.